Well, I don't know about you, but just being honest, this church is 6 months old, like 6 months and 2 weeks old, and yeah, through this whole thing, and because of the last 6 months, I can honestly say I love Jesus now. More than ever before. I love Jesus now more than I did 6 months ago. And part of the reason, it's not because of how big this is or how fast this is moving, or part of the reason is, the main reason is you. Like you showing up here, like 60, 70 people who said, yes, I'm with you, we're going to make this happen together, stepping out in faith, leaving your areas of comfort, the churches where you were comfortable at, you leaving those things, taking a step of faith, coming with me and making this happen and being a part of this. You've encouraged me and you've helped my faith by just showing up. So I'm excited about us doing this together, and I'm excited about it. I'm absolutely pumped about what God has in store for us next. Like, we've been doing this for 6 months. We made it to Easter. The question now is, what's next? What does the next 6 months hold for us? God, what do you want us to do for the next 6 months? And so whatever it is, I believe it's going to be big. Like, it's everything to this point has been big. And so I've come to a place in my faith where I expect God to do now just big things. I expect God to do the things that we can't do on our own, things that only God can do. So for the next month, as we consider our future, the next 6 months, the next year, and what God would have us do, for the next month together, I want us to pray this prayer. Here's the prayer. God, show us what to do and give us the courage to do it. Can we say that together? Let's say it as a prayer. Let's not just recite it. Let's offer this up to God. All right, let's say, God, show us what to do and give us the courage to do it. Sometimes God shows us what to do and we see it and it's intimidating. It's scary. God shows us what to do, and immediately we look at our resources, we look at our time, our energy, and our money, and we think, I don't know. I'm not sure we can do that. I may sit this one out. Like, when you see it, when God shows it to you or God tells you, when you see it or you hear it and you think, I don't know if we can do that, that's when you know God is in it. That's what I've learned over the last 6 months. And we're in this incredible place as a church where we are seeking God. Like, we survived the first 6 months of church of this thing we call Church of the Crossroads. It's been big, it's been crazy, but now we're asking what's next. Like, we're praying the big prayer, God, show us what to do and give us the courage to do it. We're seeking God's will for our future, and I want us to do that together. Like, I want us to rally around that prayer. I want us to rally around and seek God and what God would have us do for the next 6 months. And to do that today, to get us started on that today, there's a story in the Bible where God has brought his people to the edge of what's called the Promised Land. There's this land God says is yours. I'm giving this land to you. They've been journeying for 40 years. They come to the river, the Jordan River, to the edge of this Promised Land. Like, they're across the river from the Promised Land. They can see the Promised Land. But as they get there, as they consider crossing the river and stepping into the Promised Land, there are some reservations and some hesitations. And so I want us to look at this story because I think their story kind of parallels ours in some ways. And to set the story up, it's in Deuteronomy. We're gonna look at Deuteronomy here in just a few minutes. But to set it up, what I like about this story is their story parallels ours as a church. Like, 1 year ago, I started sharing with people that we were going to plant a church in Mount Washington. There were a few people who were like, yes, that's awesome, you need to do that. And then there were a few people who, they weren't hateful, but some of them were like, there's already a lot of churches in Mount Washington. Like, there's 2 really big churches in Mount Washington too. How are you going to compete with them? And I was like, compete? I didn't know churches competed. Like, I'm not coming to compete. I want to complement. Like, I want to help. I want to be a partner with them in sharing the gospel in Mount Washington. So there were other people who said, church plants just don't work anymore in this part of the country. There were some who just didn't think this would work. Like, they didn't think there was a need. They kind of thought it was silly. As I researched Mount Washington and Bullitt County, I don't know if you know this, but 66% of the people in Bullitt County claim no religious affiliation. And you're telling me there's not a need? Which means that 2/3 of the people in Bullitt County claim no religious affiliation. Well, there's another third who do, but I wonder how many of those in the other third really do follow Jesus. You know what I mean? I mean, there is a need. The last 6 months have proven for us that there is a need. 13 baptisms. We're averaging around 300 here on Sundays. Countless hours of you serving our community. Last Sunday on Easter, we had 454 people in this gym. This gym was packed wall to wall, front to back. There is a need. You have had numerous conversations, and you've made invites. Like, there is a need, and I'm telling you, we are just getting started in meeting the need here. Like, we're not done yet, are we? We're not done yet. You've still got family. You've still got friends that you've invited and haven't come yet. Like, we're still waiting on them. We're still waiting. We're not done here yet. No way. Like, God has still got things to do through us. And so we're asking this morning, God, what's next? Show us what to do and give us the courage to do it. This may be our memory verse for the week, for the month, but this is kind of fast forwarding, as they cross the river, the guy who leads them across the river into the promised land, his name was Joshua. And God tells Joshua before he goes into the promised land, because the promised land, there's some things that were threatening in the promised land. We'll get to that in just a minute. But as he's leading the people over into the promised land, God tells them this. He tells Joshua in Joshua chapter 1, verse 7, he says, "Be strong and very courageous." Be strong and very courageous. For us, we're already this. Like, we're already strong because we know God, right? Everything is under God's control. Everything is under God's command. He's got the power of the universe under his reign, and at the same time, he lives in us through his Spirit. So we are, if you know Jesus Christ, if you follow Jesus, if you've surrendered to Jesus Christ, you are already strong. So since we are already strong, why wouldn't we be courageous? And so because we're strong and courageous, we should not be discouraged. And we should not be discouragers. We should be actually encouragers because we are strong and courageous. We're not discouraged because we know God. We know who we are. Like, we are God's family. We are worth it. Through Jesus, he has shown we're worth it, proven we're worth it. He's restored our relationship back to God, Jesus has. So we know who we are, and we know what our mission is. Our mission is we exist to intentionally cross paths with unconnected people in order to connect them with Jesus Christ. I've talked about this. I talk about this all the time from the beginning. This is why we came to Mount Washington. To help people connect with Jesus, to cross paths intentionally with people who don't know Jesus so that they can come to know Jesus. So we know who we are, we know what our mission is, and in short, it's to help as many people into the kingdom as quickly as possible. So we're asking now, we know who we are, this is our mission, God, what do you want us to do next with these things in mind? And I want us to be united around what's next, encouraged around what's next, and I want us to move forward together with this. So let's look at this story in Deuteronomy. The Israelites, Deuteronomy chapter 1, the Israelites have been, God led them out of Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt. They didn't own anything. Nothing was their own because they were slaves. God delivers them out of the hands of Pharaoh. They cross over the Red Sea. If you know that story, I shared that last semester. They cross over the Red Sea. Their pursuers, the Egyptian army, they are washed away in the sea as they cross over on the dry land to the other side. They wander through the desert for 40 years, heading toward this promised land, this land that God had promised them. So for 40 years, they've been traveling to the promised land. It's a land that's been promised to them by God. It's a land that God says is flowing with milk and honey. What's that mean? What's that mean when he says it's a land flowing with milk and honey? Well, what that means is it's awesome. That's just basically what it means. It's awesome. It's an awesome land. It's a great land. So they've reached the Jordan. They can see the land on the other side with their own eyes. And then Moses, who's leading them, addresses them in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 8. He says, see, look over there. See this promised land? I have given you this land. Now go in and take possession of the land the Lord swore he would give to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to their descendants after them. So Moses is saying, see the land over there? Don't be discouraged. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. Go take the land. With courage, cross the river and take the land. This is your land. All you need to do is go possess it. All you need to do is move into it. You were slaves. You didn't possess anything except what you could carry out of Egypt. Now I'm giving you something to call your own. And so they arrive at the promised land, and Moses says, now let's go take it. For us, what's our promised land? The promised land is our world. God's entire mission is for the world to connect with Jesus Christ, for all the people, for all of humanity to come to know Jesus Christ. This is our mission. This world is our land. Your world, if you could identify your world is your home or your family. And your home and your family is His. He wants to possess your home and your family. Your job is to share His love with your kids or with your spouse. Lead them to Jesus. That's your promised land. Maybe it's your neighborhood, your friends, your classmates, your next door neighbors, your coworkers. God is saying, go. Being a part of what God is up to. Like God says, I want you to be a part of my mission. I'm inviting you to be a part of my mission. Now, I don't need you. I'm God. I can do this without you, but I'm inviting you into something that's bigger than you, something that's better than you. And sometimes when God calls us to do something, we can't see what the end result is. We just move. We can't see it. God has been doing some amazing things and some amazing things here that we didn't know He would do. Like when we started this church, we needed equipment. And my question was, how are we going to... We're going to come up with the money for this equipment. We're going to come up with this equipment. And somebody just showed up and said, hey, do you need equipment? And they donated almost everything that we needed. We needed children's ministry leaders. And I didn't know where to start. And in the end, somebody just showed up and said, hey, do you need children's ministry leaders? And they were people that I hadn't even thought of. And they're now leading our children's ministry back here. That wasn't me. They just showed up. God just put it on their heart. God brought them to us. Like back in December, we decided, we just kind of fired one for range and said, hey, we're getting tight in the cafeteria. Why don't we move to the gym? Well, I think the gym might consume us. It might be too big, but let's try it. And so we moved to the gym, and we pack out the gym now. Like we didn't know that would happen. It just did. We decided back in Halloween, let's try this Halloween neighborhood deal, and 1,000 people showed up to this home in their neighborhood where we were throwing this block party. All of this in the last 6 months, all of this, we need to recognize this. God has been way ahead of us in preparing the way. God knows what He's doing here, even though I sometimes I don't. He does. And so that's because He is way ahead of us, and because God does know, we need to be praying, God, show us what to do and give us the courage to do it, specifically in regard to our mission. If we are to intentionally cross paths with unconnected people to connect them with Jesus, how do you want us to do that next? What's next for us in that? The question, what's next, is a question that can either raise up fear in you or grow the faith that's in you. It can either raise up fear or faith in you. What's next? And I'm telling you this, what God has in store for us next is going to require faith. For some of us, it's going to require leaps of faith. Some of us aren't leapers. So it's going to require steps of faith. That sounds easier. But faith means we don't have everything figured out to the very end, yet we still move forward. God says, this is what I have for you now. take a step of faith. Here's what I have for you now. Take this leap of faith. You don't know how it's going to turn out, I do, but I'm just asking you, here's to take this next step. Like I can pray to cross paths with someone. If that's our mission, I can pray to cross paths with someone. But sometimes the fear in me raises up like, oh man, but what if I do cross paths with someone who doesn't know Jesus, with someone who's unconnected, and they ask me some questions that I don't have answers to? Like my fear, if I allow it to control me, will keep me from living out this mission. What's next? And I won't know what to do. I'm afraid I won't know what to do if I cross paths. But listen, sharing God's love, our mission, sharing God's love is very simple. It's lending a hand. It's showing up to help. It's being a listening ear. It's just talking or answering a question. Like, to this point, I've not asked you to share your whole story, like share the entire story of Jesus and then you baptizing someone. Like, I just want you to make introductions. I just want you to introduce someone to Jesus by loving them in maybe some irrational ways, by showing up in their lives with compassion and help. Let's keep reading this story. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 22 through 25. So Moses says, go and don't be afraid, take the land. Here's what happens next. Moses says, so I tell you this, then all of you came to me and said, we're not ready to go yet. Let's send some men ahead to spy out the land for us and bring back a report about the route we are to take and the towns we will come to. So Moses says, well, that seemed like a good idea to me, so I selected 12 of you, one man from each tribe. They left and they crossed the river and they went up into the hill country and they came to the valley of Eshcol and explored it. Taking with them some of the fruit of the land, they brought it down to us and reported, yeah, it's a good land that the Lord our God is giving us. So Moses is encouraging them to move forward. The people are like, well, hang on just a second. Let's send some scapegoats in there. Like, let's see if these guys get killed or not. And so he sends 12 spies into the land, and they report back it's a good land. Now, here's kind of what happens. They all come back and say it's a good land. But 10 of them say, yeah, the land is good, but the people who live there are not. 10 of them said, I'm not sure we should go. We don't have the power and the resources to take this land. There are giants in this land, like these gigantic 8-foot-tall warriors in this land. How are we don't have any weapons. How are we going to conquer these giants? I'm not sure we should go. And by man's standards, like in a very logical, if you think logically, yes, it would not make sense for them to go fight giant warriors. That would be illogical to go do that. And so they're kind of spot on when it comes to man's logic. Yeah, they will defeat us if we fight them. But they were filled with fear. Like, because they saw the giants, they were like, no way, we're not going to do that. We're not going to go. There's no way we could conquer them. 2 of the spies, though, a guy named Joshua, a guy named Caleb, said, there's giants. But God has promised us this land. Like, this land is already ours. God will deliver those giants, deliver those enemies, deliver those threats, deliver those people into our hands. We just need to go. So there were 10 spies who were scared, who said no. There were 2 spies who were moving forward in faith, like they had no fear. So the spies were divided. 10 were against it, 2 were for it. 10 said no, 2 said, yeah, let's go. When it comes to what God has in store for us next, will you move forward with faith or will you stand frozen in fear? That's kind of the question. I hope you want to say faith. I want to move forward with faith. Like, I hope you can even picture yourself with faith and courage doing radical loving things for our neighbors and our city. Like sharing your faith and love to others by being socially adventurous. Like, this is kind of what I'm asking you to do. I want us to be socially adventurous, to take risks in love for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of the souls of your family and friends and the people here in Mount Washington. I want us to live socially adventurous lives in faith. Like, I hope you want to say faith. I hope you can picture yourself operating in this way. But I also understand that there are things to be concerned about, and I also understand this: living by faith will cost you something. If God shows us what to do next, in order for you to do it, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost all of us something. All I know is whatever next steps God has for us, it will require us dying more and more to ourselves than before. You can be sure of that. It will require sacrifice. It will require giving up what I want for the sake of the gospel. It's going to be uncomfortable. It will make you uneasy. It will be a challenge to you. It will be difficult. Some of you, once we figure out what God has in store for us next, may even decide to leave Church of the Crossroads because we're just asking too much of you. It's just too difficult. Your faith always costs something. If your faith costs you nothing, then your faith has no value. Listen to this. Your faith is measured by how much it costs you. Like if what we do is based on faith, the next question is what? God, what do you want us to do? If you operate based out of fear, the next question is not what, it's how. God, how are we going to do that? How are we going to, we don't have the resources for that. We don't have the time for that. God says, here's what I want you to do, and we go, how? Like, God's got it. God's got the details. In faith, we just say, okay, then God, if this is what you want us to do next, then where do you want us to do it? Like, where do you want me to go? Where do you want us to move? Where do you want us to go? Fear doesn't say where. Fear says, okay, you're asking us to do that. In this room, who do you want to do that? Like, I hope it's not me. I hope it's somebody else. Like, who do you want to do that? Fear says, who do you want to go? Because I'm asking that question because I feel really good where I'm at right now. This is a comfortable place for me, and I don't want to move from where I'm at right now. Faith also asks when. God, you've shown us what you want us to do. You've showed us where you want us to go. Faith also asks, so when do you want us to do it? Fear doesn't ask when. Fear asks why. Like, why would you ask us to do that? Are you hearing what I'm saying? Like, our vision as a church, our mission as a church has got to be based on faith. And so we ask questions like what, when, and where. Fear doesn't ask those questions. Fear asks how, who, and why. See, and here's the thing about fear. Fear leads to wandering. Let's look at this. Let's continue looking at this story. For the Israelites, when the spies came back and they report about the land, like it's a good land, but there are some threats there, they were too afraid to go. And so they talked the people out of going into the promised land. Like, they've traveled for 40 years to get to this place. Spies go in, land's good, people are bad, don't think we should go. And so they don't. The spies talk the people into not going into the promised land. So they rebel against God. They settle for their own comforts. And it resulted in them turning around and wandering for another 40 years before they come back to this place again. So they are homeless and nomadic for 40 years, excited, headed to the promised land. They get to the promised land, they're like, no. Another 40 years then, because they rebelled, for another 40 years, they wander. Deuteronomy 1, verses 26 through 28 says, Moses is kind of sharing the story. He says, but you were unwilling to go up. You rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. You grumbled in your tents and said, the Lord hates us. So he brought us out of Egypt to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us. Where can we go? Our brothers have made our hearts melt in fear. They say about the people in the land, the people are stronger and taller than we are. The cities are large with walls up to the sky. We even saw Anakites there. Like they rebelled. Like they were talked out of in fear going into the promised land. Like we saw Anakites. And Anakites were giant warriors, skilled warriors. Fear leads to wandering. In this case, they wander for another 40 years. I don't know about you, but I don't wander well. Like once you start wandering as a church, you just start doing church. Like once you start wandering as a church, we just think, you know what, it's comfortable here now, so we have a nice little church service here. We'll just have nice little programs for our kids. We'll just kind of settle for this place, for this time, and we'll just keep doing what we've been doing. Like we'll settle for what we've always been doing. We'll just hunker down and we'll just do church. And I'm telling you this, I don't do that well. I don't. The church isn't a building. The church isn't an event on Sunday mornings. Like the church is people. The church is faith-filled people living out the mission of God in their neighborhoods, in their city, at their work, at their school. Like the church is you on mission out there. In here on Sunday mornings, this is just where we gather to celebrate what God has done this past week. And it's a place for you to be trained and shored up for the mission work this upcoming week. That's what Sundays, that's what this gathering is about. To prepare you for another week on mission out there. But wandering, like frozen in comfort, frozen in time, frozen in fear, I don't do that well for very long. Like I won't give my life for that. Because when this just becomes another Sunday, I won't do it. Like I won't give my life for just doing another Sunday. And neither should you. Neither should you. God has so much more in store for us. Like He wants me and He wants you to be filled with passion and with purpose, living out your faith for others to see, living out your faith for that person who is unconnected to Jesus, living it out in front of them so that they can see. That person who you cross paths with this week, they need that from you. They need to know that God has possessed you and is possessing this land. You taking risks, you being socially adventurous, you putting yourself out there, you taking huge steps of faith, you saying, I refuse to sit back in comfort, rather I will instead shut out my fear and I will reach my home. I will reach Mount Washington. I will reach Bullitt County. Like this is our home. Like I will reach my home. I will reach the people in my home. This is why we started this church in this community, in your home. Because so many people, or as I began to investigate, so many people were driving outside of their hometown to go to a variety of churches outside of town, driving 20 minutes, driving 30 minutes to churches that were not in their own hometown. Churches that couldn't or weren't invested in this town. And so we showed up because we want to train and encourage you right here to love the people right here. And if given the opportunity to invite them right here in their own town into this community of believers that will love them and that will lead them to Jesus and that will help them grow in Jesus. I talk to a lot of ministers from other churches often. And as we talk, I hear often them say, man, our church is really struggling. And I'll say, well, what do you mean? And a lot of them say, well, we're kind of running out of money. Which usually means when you're running out of money, you're running out of people. And I'll say, well, what's going on? And they say, well, we've had a lot of people leave, people move, life circumstances, people getting sick, people dying, and I'll think as they're telling me that, well, that's normal. It's normal for a church to lose 15 to 20% of its people every year because of life circumstances. People move, people get transferred because of work or whatever. Like that's normal. And then I think this, the problem isn't that they're losing people. The problem is they aren't bringing in new people. And you can usually track back to a time when the church got comfortable and the church quit taking risks and they quit making changes and they quit living on mission. They quit working outside the building and they settled in to just do church on Sunday. And now they just do what they've always done. And no one is living boldly or courageously in their own hometown. No one new is showing up. And now they're wondering, and they're not reaching new people. Like when you reach people, the church grows. Fear leads to wondering, but faith leads to conquering. Here's the question of the day. Do you want to wonder, or do you want to conquer? Which is it for you? Deuteronomy 1:29, Moses says this, "Then I said to you," so they're standing at the edge of the promised land, trying to decide to go in, and Moses says, "Do not be terrified. Do not be afraid of them. The Lord your God, who is going before you, will fight for you." What we do next as a church is going to require this kind of faith, like trusting completely in the Lord. And faith is this, based in Hebrews 11:1. It says, "Now faith is this, confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." Like what I hope for, and this is what God's mission is, what I hope for is more people in the kingdom of heaven. Like when it comes to our hope, when it comes to our faith and our hope, we need to have appropriate hope. Our hope needs to line up with God's plan. And we may not know how to do it, but God does. Fear and discouragement will keep you frozen. Fear and discouragement will cause you to list out all your fears and all of your reasons why you can't be a part of this mission, of this work. Now, I don't know about you, but I cannot be satisfied with the thought of the next generation, your kids, growing up and dying without the hope of Jesus. And I will do everything in my power to ensure that your kids and your kids' friends and your kids' friends' parents connect with Jesus, know Jesus, are saved by Jesus, and make it to heaven with us. I can't be satisfied with that, with the thought of the next generation not knowing Jesus, so I'll do everything in my power. I hope you will too.